Welcome back to the show. I was tempted to do a fake, terrible British accent to imitate Nick, but I feel like probably shouldn't try. Um, I wanted this to be our best episode ever, like from a technical perspective, but I suspect it's not going to be. But we'll see. Um, yeah, we're here, just the two of us today. And Nick is busy with other commitments, which probably involve drinking and playing football. And yeah, that's just the two of us holding it down. It's been a bit of a up and down last few weeks in terms of the podcast. We've been super busy, and everything's been a bit hectic for all of three of us, I think. So, and for those thousands and millions of viewers that are hanging on every episode, I do apologize. We've been a bit slow, but yeah, we're back, the two of us. How are you doing, Michela? How's it going?
Really good. I have some exciting news that I'm ready to share probably in a couple weeks once things are a little more finalized. So, I mean, you already know what it is, but for the viewers out there, our millions of viewers. Wait, what?
You're pregnant. Oh my God. Congratulations.
Stop. You're jinxing me. I'm knocking on like 100 times for that.
I'm knocking two for you. Yes. God.
Oh my God.
No. Yeah.
Anyway, as we were just talking about how much I don't want children yet. Yeah. Okay. But other than that, back in Michigan right now. I was in Chicago last weekend visiting my sister. So that was kind of fun. A little bit more of an urban setting for the first time, but we are getting a lot of rain. So I've been doing a lot of salamander hunting for a bit in the vernal pools, like just kind of staking out like at midnight and 1 a.m. to go look for some spotteds, and it's been actually pretty fun. So yeah, what about you? How's the field station?
Yeah, so I'm here in Peru, obviously, and yeah, it's been a bit of a complicated few weeks, really busy, hectic. Some of our research plans, the site we were supposed to be at didn't quite work out, and we are at another site which we've been to before, so that's good. But yeah, so we made the best of it. It's been a good month so far. We've been here, and but super busy. Anyone who follows any of the work I do on social media knows that I work with two organizations, and the one organization's based mostly in Germany, but they come and visit twice a year. And when they come with a big team to do a lot of work, data collection, planning, filming, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty hectic. It's nearly 20 people come for nearly 2 weeks, and it's pretty hectic. So that they just left a few days ago, which is good, but like successful trip, but lots of days of like last minute planning and filming, and there will be content to come soon from that for their website and all that, and fundraising and education. But yeah, pretty hectic, but things are a little quieter now for the next couple of weeks. And it's not, you mentioned it's raining a lot up there. It's really not raining enough down here. That seems to be a consistent theme. But yeah.
Wow.
It's drier than it should be, but it's okay. Other than that, everything's going all right overall. So yeah, I guess we have a pretty interesting guest today. Michela is someone that you know and that you've sort of brought to the show. So if you want to talk about him quickly, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Jay Lombardi. He is a wildlife ecologist and landscape ecologist, and I think he's going to bring a lot of really cool stories, a really interesting background to and story of how he got where he is. And also, on a personal note, he also has a speech disfluency too. So just kind of working with all of that and to where he is now, I think is pretty phenomenal. So I'm really excited to get to pick his brain about his life and where to get to where he is now. So I'm really excited to get him on the podcast.
Yeah, should be good. So let's go ahead and get right to it.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome back to Field Story. Today, we're going to be introducing Dr. Jayson Lombardi. Dr. Jayson Lombardi is a carnivore population and landscape ecologist, and his primary research is on wild carnivores and wood rats, and he's been doing that since around 2012. Dr. Lombardi has a master's in forestry and a PhD in wildlife science. And he's worked on a myriad of carnivores, actually over about what he said, 20 carnivores. And he has worked on Allegheny wood rats and cats on 2 continents. And additionally, too, he's been doing all of that and on a personal level with a disability with a speech disfluency, which is very interesting and I'm sure very, very difficult to go through, but very rewarding and inspiring as well. So I'm really excited to introduce him today, and I just wanted to give a little brief background on our guest and obviously have him really explain more about himself in detail so I don't take away the allure. And yeah, I'm just really happy to have you on here today, Jay. And yeah, feel free to kind of talk about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, uh, um, Michela and Chris. Uh, so, at my journey into the carnivore field is kind of, I would say, an unusual one, I guess, because I didn't really have like a path, and as I kind of go on, you'll kind of understand a little bit. So I'm from New Jersey in the New York City metropolitan area. If you've ever seen the show, this Sopranos, that's
Yeah.
where I'm from. So, and with that, I'm from like your a typical North Jersey Italian culture and family lifestyle like that. So for me, when I wanted to do what I wanted to do in my life, there's no one in my family who's ever been in the wildlife field or been in the like outside kind of like outdoors like industries or anything like that. So really, I had to kind of search within and search from the outside to really uh, drive that. And it's and as a kid, this is something I've always wanted to do. And I think when I was a kid, I would tell my mom, I want to study animals in the wild, and I like the carnivores, but that stemmed from the fact that the only carnivores around me are coons. So it was
Yeah.
just coons, like possums and skunks, and that's all I saw.
Yeah.
Um, and so like that evolved, and I think being in the New York City area, I was exposed to like the Bronx and the museum of the American Museum of uh, 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 Natural History. So going there, seeing those animals and stuff like that was kind of the driving force in that, and then like having like those animal like fact files and uh, books and stuff, and just that was kind of like what I wanted to do as a kid. But the journey and how to actually get that done, I had no I really idea. And I remember in high school, my counselor at the time had said, "So, what do you want to study in college?" And I said, "Wildlife or like something." And she said, "So you want to be a veterinarian?" I'm like, "No." "You want to be
No.
a zoo keeper?" I'm like, "No." And I realized that in other parts of the country, if you say a wildlife biologist, some counselors, they know what that means. Like
Yes.
if you live in Texas, like they know what that means. But in Jersey, they don't know what that means, and so and so trying to find a college that fit was really hard. And so I ended up going to a very small college in just outside of Philly. It's Delaware Valley University. It was a college, and when I say it's small, I mean it was about the size of a high school. So it was like 1,800 like people in the college. So again, a really small college. But again, and so the classes I took, they were interesting. But back then, college, I was a lot more interested in the college experience than I was like getting like experience itself. So like I know if you were in college at like a big time a university like say Texas A&M or University of Florida, a school that had an established wildlife program. As an undergrad, you could be a technician on those projects. You can volunteer on those projects. You get exposed to maybe the master's students, the PhDs. There was none of that at the college that I went to. So the only experience I got was in my ology class. We did rodent surveys, or in my wildlife class, we did bat hybrid binocular and bat netting and stuff. And that was the experience I got. The first real job I had was as I worked at a restaurant in the summers in college, I volunteered at a wildlife rehab at her doing working with raccoons and skunks and stuff. And I did that for the summer. So I just took care of injured and orphaned or raccoons in the mornings all summer. And so that was kind of the start of it. And I've always wanted to go to grad school, but again, didn't know what I was doing. And even though there was a wildlife program at the college I went to, and that's what my bachelor's is in, it's the framework wasn't as robust as it could be at the time. And so getting that path and knowing how to do certain things and knowing you don't just apply to grad school, you have to contact professors or find assistantship. I didn't know any of that. And again, I was more interested in the college area and just being a undergrad. So I worked at a zoo during the summer before my senior year itself. And that was just one that was by my house. But I didn't think that would help me. And looking back, by the time I graduated, I didn't really have a plan per se. I didn't really know. I just thought I just go to grad school, and anyone that I talked to was oh, you just go online and you find a program and you apply itself. So I graduated without a job, and I just came home and so despite having a lot of academic success, there was no job for me because I didn't put myself out there and set myself up that way. That eventually, at the time, my parents had moved to Florida, and so I moved down there, and I ended up getting a internship at the Jacksonville Zoo, and where I ended up that fall doing behavioral observations of their captive red wolves. And so I just sat in the mornings and observed the wolves for 3 or 4 hours, because they just didn't know much about what their wolves were doing. They had expressed concerns that the pair that they had were not having pups or anything, and because that's what they were trying to do. Over the course of those few months itself, I was able to quickly determine that male was not accepting of the female. So I don't know what ultimately happened, but I was able to kind of provide that information back to them, and they were able to kind of try to mitigate that. And from there, I ended up getting a job with the National Park Service, or I would say a internship with the Student Conservation Association with the National Park Service in Olympic National Park, doing spot owl work. I think I was a little overzealous in my application because I don't think I truly understood what that job actually entailed until I got there. Because I had done a fair amount of hiking and camping, but working in the Olympic Mountains in a temperate rainforest in the winter, spring in northwestern Washington, where you're climbing up and down, not on trail, you're hiking off trail, you're hiking up into those old growth forests, like up avalanche chutes. It's just, and so I started that job, and I bring that up because that job was a large learning experience. It was like my first full like field job, and I was there for 6 days. And then on my 6th day there, we were in a backcountry tour, and I tore my hip flexor while I was 5 miles in, and I hiked the remaining 7 back in there. And so that was that kind of thing I had to like overcome. That I rehabbed that for about a month or so, and then I went back into the field or so. And so that was, and those next few months or so, I was able to adapt to the job itself, but having to overcome that early on was really hard. And ultimately, again, not understanding that this could lead to something, not understanding I could get a technician position with the National Park Service out here. I didn't know that was a thing. So I didn't bother talking to the biologist. Like, hey, once this like internship's over, could I get a technician position? Because my like the other interns ended up getting that. I just didn't know. So we finished up, and I just went back home and went back to the restaurants that I was working at. But I was trying to get into grad school at the same time. While I was there, I was accepted into a graduate program, but they told me I couldn't enroll because the funding was pulled. So again, I have this acceptance to this program, but then I don't have any ability to go. And so I said, well, I'm going to try to gain some experience on my own while working full time. And so I like paid to get a chemical mobilization training with animals. I volunteered with the New Jersey Fish and Game. I volunteered on a urban coyote project up in Cape Cod, and during that time, I was just sending emails, like sending cold emails, and I was cold calling professors to see if they had cold calling, cold emailing professors if they had any projects coming up, if they had funding. And I was working with a mentor through the Wildlife Society itself to try to help with that. And in that process, I was able to secure a master's position at Stephen F. Austin State in Eastern Texas. I had heard about the school from a professor I had in college. I didn't really know anything about it. And so I looked, and I sent them some emails, and I guess both of my co-advisors then at the time were kind of said, okay, we're going to give this guy a chance. He seems like he really wants to do a position. And they were able to secure some funding for me. And so I went down there, and they said, okay, so you want to do carnivore work? We have cameras. Have you ever used a camera trap? I'm like, no, I have not used I had not used a camera trap at all. I wanted to collar them. They said, well, we don't have a collar, so you can use cameras. So we designed this camera study which ended up being on urban coyotes, bobcats, and foxes. And I ended up also catching and releasing coons and like possums. As you can tell, the coons are following me throughout my life here. And so I ended up doing that work itself, and that was like a major like learning experience because my advisor at the time were like, well, you want to do this, you can do this on your own. And so I did it on my own. There was no like, it wasn't like there was a where some students come in and the project's all done and everything's all secure. Like I had to get all the landowner like permissions. I had to get everything to do anything. So that was a lot, but it was definitely a really big learning experience itself. And I learned a lot, and I caught a lot of animals. It was kind of trial by like fire.
Right.
And that master's position, it ended. And then I ended up getting a technician position with the then Michigan Predator project with Mississippi State itself, and that was from January to like April. And it was in the winter time, and so in the cold sub-zero field conditions, eastern Texas, where it was like 85, that was definitely an adjustment. But doing it and be able to get experience working with deer and bears and snowmobiles, and just seeing how a very large project could run, and how that gets done with like multiple technicians and stuff. I was able to learn a lot from that.
Yeah.
And from that, I parlayed that to a research contract with the University of Georgia. And so I was hired to design a camera study in Shenandoah National Park, and that was on wood rats, spotted skunks, and weasels and fishers. And so the job I kind of look at that as like a post master's pre-doctoral kind of thing. Because I came in, they said, here's what we want to do, design the work. You're going to go up to the national park. You're going to carry out the work. And I did it for 5 months. And then I came back to campus, and they said, okay, you have all this data. Your contract ends in 2.5 months. You need to analyze everything, prepare 2 manuscripts, and then 2 more short like notes. It's a lot. It's horrible, and it's like I'm in this like time crunch. Like, how am I going to get this done? But I got it done. And during that time, I was applying to grad school because I wanted to do like a PhD, because my goal has always been, I wanted to do, because as I said earlier, I wanted to study animals in the wild, but I wanted to be able to do that on my own. And one thing that's been a driving force for me is that I knew I couldn't do my job at home. And I knew I couldn't get a job like I have initially in New Jersey. So I knew I had to leave. But something that's always been a driving force for me is I've always wanted to be able to somehow find some way that I can do what I do in my life, but able to eventually find my way like back home. And so that's always been something for me that I wanted to do. And now, regardless of the work itself is in North America, or I'm doing something much larger in 10 years or 20 years or so from now, and the work's like international, and but basically being able to find my way back sometime in my lifetime. It doesn't have to be now, doesn't have to be the next 5 years. It could be when I retire, but that's kind of the goal, and that's always has like been the goal. But that said, I'm applying to PhD positions all over the world, and I get an opportunity to go down to South Texas. I had left Texas after my master's, telling myself I would never go back to Texas. And so I moved back to South Texas, having never visited the school itself, never been to the area. I just knew it was a very small town, but the position was working on ocelots in Texas. So getting that opportunity to work on ocelots, a species I had heard about, I saw like on like Discovery Channel and stuff, but the fact that I didn't know they were in the US, and then we're doing this research on ocelots and like bobcats. And so I got that opportunity to go. And so that was what my like PhD was on. And I ended up staying in South Texas for 7 years for like I did my like PhD, and then that parlayed into also a postdoc. But the PhD and the postdoc were at this Caesar Kleberg Wildlife Research Institute at Texas A&M Kingsville. And I had met a lot of like awesome folks from around the country, and I was able to build my network through there. One of the things that I did, and one thing I was very fortunate in both my master's position and in both in my master's position as well as my PhD position, is my advisors, especially during my PhD, actually paid for me to go to work on campus, which with a speech pathologist, to improve my disfluency. As I was told, if you work on this is going to help you down the line. And so I've always had this speech disfluency or stutter since I was a kid. And anything that comes with that, a lot of people are like, the stigma with people with speech disfluencies or stutters is that they're dumb, they can't do anything, and they can't talk. People may like mock them and go and kind of like that. And so that's always been something I've experienced in my life, but I always told myself I am just considering myself a normal person that just has a disfluency itself. But when I was younger and in college, it was pretty bad, and I didn't realize it at the time until I started going during my master's, and then people started noticing, wow, you actually like your voice is a lot clearer, and I really give credit during my PhD working on it with those speech pathologists during that time, and I was able to improve my fluency. And then because of the institute of where it is, and my project having a lot of funding, I was able to give talks all over the country. I was able to give the talks in Italy and Switzerland and so forth, be able to do all this awesome work while also working with ocelots and bobcats and coyotes, and able to be really engaged on everything. Um, I think the highlight or the low light for me is I didn't have a PhD graduation because of COVID. And so that kind of went in straight into like my postdoc. And so during my postdoc, I was able to kind of expand the work on ocelots. And so I can say to this day that I've probably done a large chunk of what we know about Texas ocelots over the last few years or so, from everything from collaring to cameras to highways to, and now currently being involved in the helping like get some of the initial modeling done on the reintroduction process of ocelots, and being like a part of that, and being able to connect with the scientists in that space itself, but also learning to work with like private landowners and everything. And so I think as I was finishing up my like postdoc and stuff, I kind of felt that I had for a while wanted to go into like academia, but I also kind of felt like at the end of the day, it was never to be a professor. It was always to study animals. So I ultimately decided, and I kept applying for positions all over. And then eventually I landed on the position I'm at currently. And so I applied with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And then in December of 2022, I was hired and I moved across the country. And so currently I am the statewide large carnivore research coordinator. And the main jobs of that is I'm the lead outline scientist for the state. And I also assist with our internal research efforts on wolves. And so that job itself, again, going from ocelots or bobcats or coyotes or coons and trying to find my way up, and eventually being able to now work with much larger carnivores, it is a blessing. But I think what's also for me really rewarding is that all the connections I've made throughout my journey and path, I've been able to, besides the work I do for CDFW, in my time in the evenings or on the weekends itself, I'm able to still contribute to research like on ocelots or other species itself. I'm still involved in projects in Texas. I'm involved in projects on the East Coast. I'm involved in international projects. So that has been really the driving force for me, being able to be involved in all this work itself, because at the end of the day, it's my passion. So it's like working here is a job, but everything else, like for me, it's not really a job per se. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So yeah, Jayson, that was amazing. Thank you for that. Also, if any of the viewers wondered if I probably disappear periodically, I'm as always having technical difficulties on my end. I think it's recorded.
Hi, everyone. I know you may be a little surprised and confused to hear my voice instead of Chris's, as it just cut off. Well, as Chris said, he thinks he was recording. He, in fact, was not. So, therefore, I will be reading his question that he did ask Dr. Lombardi. And his question was, how did Dr. Lombardi manage to overcome the stuttering and not let it hold him back? For many that do not know, Chris did actually have a speech disfluency growing up and was not able to really speak in public and on the phone until his mid 20s. So Chris was really deeply relating with Dr. Lombardi, and it is apparent that everyone does overcome their own disabilities and trials and tribulations in many different ways. So now Dr. Lombardi will be answering this question for him.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just like, I think from it's just, it kind of starts as I was a kid. It's just always something I've always wanted to do, and I was very fortunate that my parents, maybe at the time, didn't really truly understand what they were getting themselves into when they told me to pursue my dreams itself. I don't think my mom realized that meant I would be like snowmobiling in a blizzard, or like handling a larger carnivores, and or like whatever that means, and knowing that like that's where it is. But for me, it's like, just, it's been that like go. And I also do want to credit my friends at home, like back in the East Coast, because they're not in, unlike maybe some people in this field or whatever, like my friends at home are not in wildlife at all. Like they're in just, but they all have this like entrepreneurial type spirit, and they all tell me that when I was trying to decide if I should keep going for like my PhD, they said, just go, just get it done, and just excel in what you do in your career itself. So having that support of my friends itself, who aren't in this field, but just said, hey man, you're passionate about this stuff, just go. And just, so that's been like, having my family support, my friends support is really important to me. So that's been a large driving force. And as far as my speech goes, I've never let it really stop me. Like there's been times when I would feel like I can't talk, or I don't want to give a talk. Like I know during my PhD that they had this 3-minute thesis competition, where you basically have to give a like elevator like pitch in like under 30 minutes. And I told my advisor, I said, I'm not doing this. You're putting a time limit on me. Like most people, like they might get nervous. Like I physically can like just be unable to say something, and it's not my fault. It like, that's just the way my body is like that. And so he just said, you can handle it. And I just had to practice and practice and practice and practice. I ended up getting runner up in that, which was great. And like, I think being able to do those like public talks and those scientific talks, like I think that really has been what's giving me the confidence. I think being able to give like now like 37 like or something, like scientific talks, and being able to do seminars and different things like that, has really given me kind of the confidence that I could literally talk to anyone. I think working in say like a urban area, or working with like private landowners, or it's just talking to people. And the more people you talk to, you're just, I couldn't not talk to anyone, so I had to. um and I think I realized over time, people generally don't care. There are some
Yeah.
like there are some like bad apples in there who might say something, and it does still bother me from time to time. I can't say that it doesn't bother me when someone says something. It still bothers me, but I try not to let it affect me.
Sure. Yeah, that, I mean, just listening to you has been so incredible and very inspiring. And as a person, I always like to say, as a green person in the field still. And it's funny because although I feel that I had a very similar start to you, Jay, whereas I went to a school, my family, Italian family too. had no idea about wildlife. So right when I went to a really small college, I went to a college about 2,500 as well. And wildlife was a big program, but we didn't have masters, we didn't have PhDs. So when I had an idea and I knew that I wanted to work in wildlife, but I didn't know anything about how do I, get a master's. I didn't know. And so I did the same thing where I had to cold call, cold email. And then I didn't really know much about internships or volunteering. And so I just knew I needed to get that experience. And so one thing that I found with myself and what it seems like with you, especially with all the experience that you have accrued, is that with people like that, when you don't know and you're like, I have to get as much experience as you can, and then you get getting into your master's and or PhD, you have more experience versus the people who kind of have it set for them. They know, okay, right after school, I have this experience, so I'm going to jump into my master's and PhD, and they don't have that volunteer field experience. And so, so I can really relate to that because I always felt like I was really behind because of that. And because I just didn't have that knowledge, I didn't really know much about being in the field. So I guess for people in you and my position, what kind of advice would you give for this younger generation who maybe doesn't have the privilege to go to a very large university with a really renowned wildlife program with many master's students to mentor them and or PhD students?
Yeah, I think for like those like folks who might not be at and like a lot of art school or stuff, and like I've noticed, I do see that within the wildlife society and other professional societies itself. You're starting to see that a lot more, where people are coming from those non-traditional wildlife programs. They might be like a biology major, or they might be an ecology major and an environmental science major at these smaller schools, or maybe the case may be. I think in a way the wildlife field is changing, and and I think for those students, you just need to find a way to do something. It just doesn't have to necessarily be anything large or grand. Like I think especially with working with the carnivores, everyone wants to work with big carnivores. Everyone wants to work with carnivores. And as I told a lot of people, just start doing something. Like you could start with like, say, like working with bats, and then you could then try to parlay that into something. And I think there's a lot of skills you learn. You could work with birds, or you can work with like lizards or something, and then you can turtles, and you can say, well, I've done these tasks, or I've done this ray capture study on turtles, but we also do that stuff with other animals. So you can say, well, I have this experience, I know how to do this, I have this animal handling experience, whatever, and you can just parlay that into something. You can. And I think the power of social media today is amazing, because it can connect you with people. And I think a lot of people who are working on their masters or PhDs, if you live in the local area, you can contact them. And I'm sure most of those students, if you contact them and said, hey, can I come out and volunteer with you, or can I just talk to you, or can I see how you do things for a day or two, most of those people might be willing to do that if they're able to. And then you get this jump start. You can maybe talk to them. Maybe you can talk to some people that they're working with. You gain some connections there, and maybe you learn something. You realize, hey, I was interested in this, but this is really cool. Or then maybe down the line you see a job, and you realize, hey, I had talked to that person on this thing, and you can go from there. So I think it's just doing those small things, just a little by little, but it eventually all adds up. And don't think just because you didn't get the big internship, whatever you got, you can start small. But just working on those connections itself, you can basically find your way to where you are. And so you can be a self-made person in the field there is no path. There's not one path where I say you should do like X, Y, and Z to get to where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just at the end of the day, you can take whatever path you want to end up where you want to be. And it might take putting yourself out there at one point in time to get it done. But like anything is possible. So you just need to realize you need to be determined and willing to grind to get what you want. And it might happen overnight. Like you could get a big break, and sometimes working with different species, you might apply and the person reviewing is like, I'm just gonna take a chance on them. And sometimes it's just a chance. There's no rhyme or reason. They just like, I just have a feeling. I just feel like for some reason this application speaks to me. I'm just going to give them a chance and just surprise them. And sometimes it's in those opportunities that you get and you're like, oh, I can't mess this up. And even you could get that job and you could possibly mess something up, but it's a learning experience. And that person who hired you knows they took a chance on you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it could all work out. And then you do those jobs and you have like amazing, like failed experiences or stories. So
yeah. Thanks. I really appreciate that, Jay. We still good, Chris? Yeah, so no. No. Oh man, the technical difficulties we all have. Well, thank you so much, Jay. I think that was beautiful advice and very well said. And I think that, it's, again, really important for students to know that it doesn't matter, people want to go to those big top tier schools, but you can go to the small school, and it's just about the connections you make, the experience, and your work ethic, and sometimes just some luck, and that's okay. But while we are here, and hopefully Chris will get back, this is our segment where we will transfer into, your field story. I'd love to hear a field story that, whatever one you chose and that means the most to you, whether it's crazy or really inspirational, whatever you have, we'd love to hear your field story.
Right. So I've been trying to think about like if there's one that really jumps out to me.
Sure.
And there's two. But I think the first one I think would be when I was in Virginia. I was doing those camera surveys in Shenandoah National Park for the spotted skunks and the wood rats and everything. And so in doing those surveys for wood rats and spotted skunks, they are occurring on talus slopes, in like boulder fields, on cliffs and rock out crops. And if folks who've never been to Shenandoah National Park, the main like highway or road that runs through the national park is on the top of the mountain, and it kind of runs along the spine. And so you park, and then everything goes off to the side from that, or like up a cliff. And so I'd set. So on this day, I'm checking my cameras, and one of the cameras is you have walked down a trail, and as you go around the bend, you have to walk towards the cliff, and then you walk down a little bit and you descend down the cliff. And so as you're walking there's the trail, and then there's a patch of woods, and then there's the cliff, and then there's some trees. And as I'm walking along the bend, I'm not paying attention. I'm looking down, and at the time, because I am there by myself, I'm just like talking to myself because I don't have anyone around me. And Shenandoah National Park has a very high density of bears. And I had seen a lot of bears at that point. And sometimes I just felt that if I either listen to music like on a speaker, although it will annoy anyone who's hiking, but for me, it's like I don't want to be come across like bear, especially when I'm carrying a bait. I'm carrying bait in my bag, so like it smells like it smells to high hell. And then I also have like a call or also, so it's just my bag stinks, and and I'm and so as I'm walking, I'm not paying attention to what's ahead of me, and I hear something, and I look up, and there's a bear, a female with the cubs, and she's on her back, and the cubs are uh, are are nursing. So seeing a female nursing her cubs is a really awesome thing to see. Like most people don't get that opportunity. But most people don't expect you're going to get that opportunity when you're standing 10, um, 10 to 15 wind of her. The one cub saw me and ran up a tree. The other one saw me and ran into, as I mentioned, there was like a patch of like trees before the cliff. So that cub ran into there. So now there's cubs on either side of the trail. I don't know if they've gone past me, if they stayed there. The mom had no idea what was going on, and she just slowly like lifted her head and just looked at me. I don't know what she saw. She couldn't smell me. I can smell her. And my only response was, I am so sorry. And I said that to the bear. I am sorry. Didn't mean to bother you. I'm gonna leave. I am sorry. Please don't hurt me. And it would happen so fast. I saw the bear and I was like, and I just slowly backed up, slowly got around the bend, and I ran. Even though I had a huge pack on, I ran as fast as I could. And as I'm getting out, there's these tourists who are walking on the trail to come in, and they have their cameras and they have their tennis shoes, and I'm like, don't go any further. Then they didn't speak any English, and they're like, I said, bear, like bear, don't, don't, and they're like, oh, bear, and they run down the trail to get a photo with the bear.
Oh my gosh!
I'm just like, I'm getting out of here. Like I don't. And so I left, checked another camera, and then I waited a few hours, and then I came back to get that camera. But it was kind of unnerving walking past there at that point. And we were like, where is this bear?
Right.
Where could this possibly be? And so that was one of several bear stories that ended up happening that summer, where I'm just in a position and I'm like hiking through the woods, and I just hear a bear like coughing. I can hear the bear like panting, and I'm in dense like rhododendron, and I'm like, where is this bear? I can hear it. I can hear it breathing. It's not behind me. It's not in front of me. And I think it was just passed out or something, or I think it was just panting really loud somewhere within like earshot of me. And I'm like, I have bear spray. I don't know how big this is. I'm just going to keep walking. So like in just situations like that, where it's like, you don't know what you're going to run into. Thankfully, I've not been attacked yet, and hopefully that doesn't happen. But again, but again, when you work with the carnivores, you don't really like you don't really know. And I know anytime I step in the woods or go outside, I don't know what's going to like be there, and you just have
Right.
to be prepared.
Yeah. Wow. That is my favorite part. Is that I'm sorry. Oh, but no, thank you so much, Jay. This was amazing. Your story was incredible, and we just learned so much from you. And I'm sure our audience will and did
Yeah.
as too. And yeah, we just really appreciate you coming on and telling us all about yourself and your story. And we are just really glad we got to know you. You're an incredible person, scientist, and human in general. So thank you so much. And we're yeah, really happy.
Yeah.
Chris says goodbye, apparently. Yeah, thank you so much, Jay.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. We are going to wrap up for today and we will see you next week. Chris says bye-bye again.
Bye.
Hey everyone! As you can see, Chris is not here because, are we surprised? He had technical difficulties again. And so you're stuck with me for our wrap up of our episode with Dr. Lombardi. And just to overall say, Dr. Lombardi was an amazing person to have and to learn from on this episode. I learned so much from Dr. Lombardi, and it really amazed me to see all the obstacles that he has overcome in terms of his career path and his speech disfluency. I really was able to relate with him along with Chris as well in different ways. And for me, it was the fact that I started out in wildlife with no knowledge about it. I didn't know how to really get into a proper career path. I didn't know how to get to my master's. And sometimes I still struggle with, do I want to do a PhD and how do I even do that? Because I went to schools where we didn't have PhD or grad students that I could kind of get feedback from. And so did Dr. Lombardi, but it was really astonishing to see him really push through that and volunteer and translate those skills into other fields and then get his PhD and land where he is now. And then to tag along with that, having a speech disfluency during that, and then also, getting help with that during his PhD is wild. I mean, how amazing is that? I was truly inspired by his tenacity in terms of really, pushing through and fighting those obstacles. And I'm hoping that will inspire other people too who do have similar disabilities like that. I mean, I look at my master's and it's not anything like a PhD, but doing my thesis and my field work, I had no time for anything else. So for him to work on that simultaneously, wow, just amazing. I really am excited to see where Dr. Lombardi goes. I think that he is a person that will inspire many and will be a trailblazer in his field. So I'm very, very appreciative that he was able to join us today. And with that, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels. And we are working right now on getting a Apple Podcast account running for everyone and hoping that will happen within the next few months, crossing our fingers at least. Thank you so much again also for anyone who does follow us on Instagram and YouTube. We apologize for a little bit of the inactivity that we've been having. We've been so busy, all three of us, in terms of job changes, field work, and university. So bear with us as we will start to get rolling again within the beginning of the summer or late spring. So I hope you all enjoyed this episode and am hoping to see you all next week for our next episode and hopefully a very exciting guest.